Good morning, everyone. Respected Mr. Chairperson of the first technical session of the concluding day of this 3-day international seminar, Professor Ranveer Chakrabarty, who has substantially contributed to the study of early medieval economy in general and trade in particular, Professor R. Mahalakshmi, who apart from being young and promising historian, one of the biggest motivator, and with her management acumen and skill, she can persuade even the laziest like mine to present a paper before this august audience, and many of my known and unknown friends, philosophers and guides in this audience. Really, I feel excited, elevated, encouraged and inspired to be the part of this august gathering who is committed to commemorate the works of a historian whose path-making and trend-setting work on South Indian history have made us illuminated and enlightened. I must say a few words about Karasima. I came to know him as a student of graduation in Patna University while we were introduced by Professor R. Nandi on South Indian history and culture. And there were 6 prescribed textbooks on South Indian history and culture that was a must read for all the students who have to go for South Indian history and culture. Certainly the work of Karasima, Subbarailu, Nilkant Sastri were one among those. I see, very briefly speaking, I see some parallels between Karasima and Alberni. Both are Asian historians. The only difference is that Alberni remained unmarried till his life, but he always proclaimed that he has 14 wives. Certainly mathematics being one among them, astronomy being second, astrology being third, and so many. Actually, when Alberni was in the last hours of his life, he was engaged in solving an algebraic problem, algebra. Some friends and some well-wishers came to visit him to see how his health is deteriorating. He told very boldly that we will have enough time to rest on the grave. Now it is time to solve the problem with which I was struggling since last 40 or 50 years. So, friends, now I come to my topic, that is agrarian economy. First, let me acknowledge Professor Chakrabarty, whose 2 articles I have massively used, particularly the agricultural technology in early medieval North India, published in Medieval History Journal. And second one is one of your articles which with very much difficulty I got to find, or I found it, that was written or edited by Professor James Heisman on in the year 1000, published from New York. Sir, writing in 1962, a famous agriculture scientist, J. Kharke, wrote in the Modern Review that agriculture is the age-old science and arts of India, and it should not be studied just as a form of subsistence or as a form of livelihood. Rather, it must be studied by historians, sociologists, economists, etc. as a way of life. I must begin with citation of Edward Taylor, who wrote in 1883, agriculture is not to be looked on as a difficult or out of the way invention, for the rudest savage, skilled as he is in the habits of food plants he gathers, must know well enough that if seeds or roots are put in a proper place in the ground, they will grow. My topic is agrarian economy of northern India in 11th and 12th century. Actually, the early Middle Ages in Indian history, despite the negation of its identity in the earlier historiographical tradition, has succeeded in assuming an academic vigor of its own on two counts. First, the seriousness of the debate hinging around its chronological format, and second, the shifting categorization of its nature. The journey from the Dark Age via Indian feudalism to early medieval formation has not only made this period significant in terms of comprehending the basics of Indian societal developments, but this debate has also brought to focus a variety of extremely meaningful sources. My paper is going to discuss or to give a picture of the economic developments that took place in early medieval India and its finalization or the final recipient form in 11th and 12th century AD. The most important economic feature of India during the Gupta and post-Gupta period is the expansion of the erstwhile agrarian horizon. Agrarian expansion meant penetration into the domains of the tribal and an encroachment on the tribal mode of living and subsistence pattern. But it is not easy to get epigraphic evidence of tribal resistance to such efforts, as well as to demarcate between the tribal and non-tribal peasantry. The developments which characterized agricultural expansion in the early medieval ages fall into three sectors or three categories. First is the extension of cultivable land, second is improvement of drainage technology, and third is increase in crop production. Extension of the cultivable land by forest clearance and establishment of new villages would, however, presuppose a scarcity of agricultural land, and notwithstanding the oft-repeated claim about the abundance of land. The growth in human population leading to demographic change cannot be denied in early medieval India. Obviously, the pressure on land was an inevitable phenomena, and the scarcity of land cannot, however, be measured only in terms of the ability of peasantry to make use of it. Contemporary lexicons, commentaries, epigraphs, and other sources are suggestive of the fact that there was visible and unprecedented growth of agricultural items pointing to advancement in agriculture technology. Whenever we discuss agriculture, two things remain generally untouched. First is the study of the corresponding environment, and second is the changing demographic scenario. It's unfortunate on the part of the historian on history of agriculture that they have undermined the role of environment, which was incessantly instrumental and decisive in agricultural operations. Certainly, some few historians have drawn the proper attention, but M.K. Dhavlikar says that, particularly among the historians' fraternity, there has been given very little attention to study or to restructure the past environment. But Professor Ranveer Chakrabarty has also contributed an article on the past environment related to the early medieval Indian situation. Actually, recently, M.K. Dhavlikar has drawn some fresh light on the prevailing environment of early medieval India, which can strengthen our knowledge of agriculture in that period. And the period from circa AD 400 to 1000 AD was marked by frequent failures of rain, and naturally agriculture was a casualty. Corroborative evidence for adverse environment during the period is available from literature. There are references to droughts and famines in the writings of foreign travelers who visited India during the period. The severe droughts of 7th and 8th century AD have also been reflected in the KUMAR Charit of Danden. It seems that there was a slight improvement in the climate about AD 1000 to AD 1400, for which evidence is available at some sites in different parts of the country. So the increase in crop production has to be situated in the shifting environmental context. The profusion and diversity of agricultural crops that I have cited from your work in India indicates awareness among Indian writers from remote antiquity about climate and its interaction with soil and water. Sir, we all know that it was Gilbert Walker, it was the Queen, it was the W. Queen, M.K. Dhavlikar and Professor Ranveer Chakravarti who have tried to sketch the available data of the past environment that is associated with the early medieval situation. But one problem that exists, recently the sea fossil studies of National Institute of Oceanography by Rajiv Nigam and N. Khare, they have pinpointed one very important thing. They say that historians should not only go on the quantification of the data of rainfall. You simply don't go on the data or the quantification for quantified form of rainfall. It is not important that how much rainfall was in a particular year. For agriculture, it is more important that the rainfall was at which period. Was it adequate and enough at the proper time, or it was not at the improper time? Agricultural operations see a number of different complicated things, and particularly when we see the Hindu calendars and panchangs and the other astronomical works, we see that heavy rainfall does not imply to a major crop production, does not what imply. Rather, in which season, in which nakshatra, at which time the proper rainfall was observed in a particular locality. So historians must have in their mind that exactly the quantification of the rainfall data or the monsoonic activities will not give you a very intricate picture of agricultural production, but rather we will have to see the microscopically that the failure of crops or the production of the crops was in tune with the corresponding monsoonic fall or not. The Jain literature have not been very much properly consulted for making the agrarian picture, because the first constant is that most of the early medieval Jain Katha literature belong to the locality of Gujarat and Rajasthan, and they have been properly used for giving the picture of trading communities, trading activities, trading items, trading, etc., etc. But we have some meager references, but they are very forcible. Early medieval Jain Katha literature throws ample light over the character and composition of the peasantry of this period. It refers to different aspects of agrarian structure such as agricultural implements, various grades of the peasants, and the landed intermediaries. The Katha text, we get reference to all the categories of the peasant, Krishivala, Sarvasirpati, Halvahaka, etc. Katha Kos Prakran, that was written in Vikram Samvat 1105, and Vivid Tirthakalp refers to Kutumbins or dependent peasants. The Jain Adi Puran of Jin Sen, that is of 9th century AD text, refers to Sudra Karsakas who were petty farmers, and this also validates the description of Wen Sang, who says that Sudras became the peasants or Sudras became the peasants. A total new category of peasants emerged in the early medieval period called Ardhika, that is also mentioned in the Parasar Smriti of 600 to 900 AD. Mentions for the first time Ardhika as a separate mixed, as a sharecropper of separate mixed caste. The social stratification of the peasants and peasant class was based on the castes and races or on the type of occupancy, rate of the land and nature of the work. And the third type of sources that I have tried to assimilate into the paper is a peasant's view of peasant life and its categories, a study of the proverbs of North India. Actually, historians have given very little attention to study those proverbs, and those proverbs can it be useful for depicting the agrarian position or agrarian condition of early medieval North India. A proverb is an abbreviation tradition, instructional statement which comes with the wisdom of ages, what is proverbial has been established for a long time. The proverbs used by peasants in the course of this interaction, their interactions is different. Context may therefore help in understanding at least the trends of what they think of themselves and what they consider desirable in respect of living their everyday life. It is very much difficult to assess those number of proverbs. Professor R.S. Sharma, in his early medieval Indian society, a study in feudalism, has given some meager references, and he starts in the very first page when he writes that, he says that, धन मन धरती धन मन गाय किछु कुछ सोना और सब छाय. A person's real wealth is the land, second one is animals, and perhaps gold too to some extent, and the rest is worthless. And I will give only two examples. These proverbs bear of pre-modern times. Sociologists say that there are three persons, particularly during the early medieval period. The name is Dark, Ghag, and Dark. First one is Dark, second one is Ghag, and third name I will recall firstly. They all bear the early medieval figures who have propagated those Hindi proverbs, particularly in the area of North Bihar. Because many of the words or many of the other idioms that has been used by them is still current or prevalent in the North Bihar Gangetic plain. See, बच्चा बैल बहुरिया होय ना घर रहे न खेती होय. It's very beautiful. A peasant who has a calf and wife too young to be skilled and experienced in household management shall have both his cultivation and household ruined. We can also find some, you can say, the gender perspective, that how in a patriarchal society the opinion or the, you can say, the whole structure of the society is based on interfamiliar relationship. Sir, actually these proverbs should be used very judiciously. First, we cannot assess the actual number of those proverbs prevalent in those areas. Second, the proverbs that have been used in the current times, they belong to a particular area. This is almost clear. And the 14th century Maithili text refers to all those authors whose proverbs have still been very much prevalent in these areas. The proliferation of land grant during the post-Gupta period in northern India led to agrarian expansion and increased agricultural production. This expansion made available a large amount of agricultural surplus, but how this was consumed, this is a big question to solve. It is unfortunate that we cannot satisfactorily establish how the agricultural surplus was appropriated in the period before Gorian conquest. There is no means of knowing if it was ejected from the primary producer in the form mainly of landowners' claim or of taxes. Their nature is a matter of speculation. Almost nothing can be said about the share of produce they represented. Contemporary literature, epigraphs, and remains of fortified settlement give some clue to this problem. A significant portion was consumed by the establishment of the rulers and the landed aristocracy. A still larger portion was spent on the raising of standing and occasional contingents for fighting wars and maintaining royal authority. Harsha's army was larger than that of the Maurya. A third portion was spent on religious structures and establishment. Undoubtedly, agriculture was the chief source of production in pre-industrial society. Agricultural surplus was mainly consumed by the army, landed aristocracy, and religious establishment through the feudal mechanism, which made use of land grants, coercion, kingship, custom, caste, culture, caste hierarchy, rituals, and religious beliefs. These elements of feudal mechanism may be regarded as extra economic sanction or obligations. After this large-scale appropriation of the surplus, very little could be made available to traders engaged in long-distance trade or to craftsmen employed in the manufacturing petty commodities. Neither the landlords took the surplus to the market, nor did the craftsmen go there to purchase food grain and other necessary items. It seems that most transactions were in kind and that they took place outside the market system. The artisans were paid in kind or granted small plots of land for their maintenance. Naturally, the market was starved. Temples and monasteries seemed to dominate the early medieval structural landscape in almost all parts of the subcontinent. Excavations and explorations hardly exposed non-religious buildings either of brick or stones. Though some fortresses of early medieval period can be identified and need rigorous exercise to explore owing to neglect of early medieval archaeology. R.S. Sharma, on the basis of some classical text on architecture and few Pala Chandela fortresses in Bihar, described the nature of such settlements. The medieval fort, according to him, was a multi-purpose institution. It was the place where the taxes collected in kind could be stored, garrison of soldiers could be maintained, and the neighboring people could seek shelter in times of war, flood, and famine, and above all, it was the final instrument through which the prince or the chief could perpetuate his power over the peasantry. And finally, I would like to say, sir, that in 11th and 12th century AD, in text, we find a massive increase or quantitative increase in the number of products. Vishnu Purana mentions 17 types of grains, and out of 17, 13 type of grain products were used in religious sacrifices, in the festivals, or in the burial that was prevalent in ancient India. So this is my final submission. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.